Morning everybody. I want to have a look at array algorithms in more detail. Specifically, the algorithm to find the total or sum of all the values stored in the array, as well as the algorithm to find the highest value. So let's start with the sum. I gave you the algorithm, and this algorithm is extremely important. You need to know it off by heart. This is one little bit of programming that's parrot work. If we know the algorithms and later on, much later on, patterns, then it makes our programming life a lot easier. So the algorithm is first of all given in just plain English, what we need to do, and I've also given you the VB example thereof. So I need to use a variable called sum. Before I start adding all the data, this sum must be initialized to 0. I need to start at 0. I can't start at 10 and then calculate the data because my sum would be wrong. I now need a loop to go over to traverse the array. So from the start to the end of all the elements, need to go over the array. And then as I go over each element, I need to add that element to the sum. And after the loop, I can use the sum as is needed. So in VB, the code would look something like this. First of all, I need to initialize the sum to 0. So assign 0 to sum. And now I need a for loop. For each loop would also be able to do the job because I just simply need to traverse all the data in the array. So for each loop, an enhanced for loop, perfectly fine. If I use a counter, I need to go from the start, so that would be the first element, up until the last element. And I can always get that using array name.length -1. Later on, when we go to filled arrays, you simply use, instead of array name.length, you will use array count, ARCNT. So that part would be replaced by ARCNT, array count. In the loop, we need to add to the sum each of the elements. But let's see how this would work in practice. Let's assume we've got an array with 5 elements. So 45, 12, 66, 80, and 20 must be added together. I am going to desk check this code now, so I'm going to go slowly through it on paper, same as what the computer would do, same as what my interpreter or compiler would do. So right at the start, when I've got local variables, they would be 0, but just make sure of that. Assign 0 to sum. And now my for loop starts. So right at the start again, 0 would be assigned to count. Why? I want to go and access the first element. The first element in the array will have a subscript of 0. Second element, subscript of 1. Third element, fourth element, up until the end. So I always end at last subscript is length -1. So how many elements I've got? -1. Because we start at 0. So if my counter is 0, that's first of all assigned, and then the next step of the for loop would be to test if I reach the end. Is counter less than 5 minus 1, less or equal to B? Yes, it is. It is less or equal to 4. And now the code would do the following. Take sum, it's currently 0. Add array numbers of position 0. Why 0? Because count stores 0. So that would be 45. 0 plus 45 is 45. save that answer in sum, and thus 45 would be saved in sum. I need to take the previous value of sum and add the new data to it. Next count would execute, so that would increase count by 1. It's increased. The for loop will test again. Did I reach the end yet? Is count less or equal to array numbers dot length minus 1? Is count less or equal to 4? Yes, it is. So I can continue. And now my code says, take sum, that's 45, and add to it the data at position count, and count now stores 1. So that means 45 plus 12. Computer would calculate that, and then we say, okay, store the result of that calculation in sum. So that means 57 would be stored in sum. 45 plus 12. Next count would execute, and count would be incremented to 2. The code would now jump to the start of the loop again, and again it's going to test. Is count less or equal to 4? Yes, it's less or equal to 4, so we can do the loop again. Repeat the loop. And now the code says, take sum, it stores 57, and add to it array numbers, position 2, the third element. So we're busy with the third iteration of the loop. Went over the loop once, twice, and this is the third time that we are going over the statements in the loop. So now we need to add 66, because that's what's stored at array numbers position 2. Count stores 2, so it indicates the 2 over there. And then this result, 57 plus 66, I need to save that answer in sum. And this, thus, 123 is saved in sum. Next count would be executed, and that says add 1 to count. So count becomes 3. The loop would start again, and again count is tested against array name, array numbers dot length minus 1. So is count less or equal to 4? Yes, it is. So I can do this loop again. And in the loop, I will now take sum, it's 123, and we're going to add element position 3, so 80, array numbers, and count stores 3 so for me, so that means 80 must be added to 123. The result is saved in sum, so 203 is saved in sum. Next count would execute, and that would increase count to 4, and again we're going to test. Is count less or equal to 4? Yes, it's less or equal to 4, so we can execute the loop once more. So take 123, add to it the data at position count, and count stores 4, so that means 20. So 203 plus 20, the answer is saved in sum, and I've got 223. Next count would execute next, so that means 4 is increased, incremented to 5, and again the loop's going to start. And now the loop tests, is count less or equal to 4? No, 5 is not less or equal to 4, so this is the indication that the loop needs to stop. And at this stage, code will jump to the first statement after the loop. And in our case, it's going to display sum. So it's going to display in the list box sum, the words, and 2 to 3. Okay, so my for loop have got iterations. I go over and over and over. Only this one statement. It's written inside the loop. Every time that I execute this statement, because I've got a nice for loop, count gets incremented. It starts at position 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then afterwards it ends. And in this way, we get to add all the data in the array to the variable called sum. If I forget that part, if I just simply assign the data, it's not going to do the job because I don't take the previous data each time. I'm just going to assign the next and the next and the next data. So remember, the formula must be correct. Okay, if we now go have a look at the algorithm to find the highest value. Let's do it like that. Just make sure that you can see everything on the screen. Okay, so again I've got exactly the same array. The algorithm says I'm going to use a variable called highest, and I'm going to assume the first data would be the highest. And thereafter I'm going to go over the array. Apologies, it traversed the array. I don't need to start at the start. I don't need to start at 45. I've already assumed 45 is the highest. I need to compare the rest of the data now. So from 12 to 20 in my example to find the highest value. In the loop, I'm going to test each array element against the highest. If one of them would be higher, I'm going to store that as my new highest. So in VB, the statements would look like this. Assume the first element stored in the array is the highest. And now I've got a counter-controlled loop. I can't use a for each loop. I can't use the enhanced for loop. I need to start at the second element. So I start at 1, not at 0. And I still need to go traverse all the elements. So up to length minus 1. So again, when we get to filled arrays, instead of array numbers.length, we're going to use AR count, array count, because that now indicates the end of the array. But for now, we use just an array filled with data. So it's array name, so array numbers in our case, dot length minus 1. And each time in the array, remember my counter gets incremented now again, from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 in our case. We're going to test each one of those values, see if it is bigger than highest. If it's bigger than highest, then we know we've got a new highest, and we need to save that value in highest. And we can continue like that. So let's go and test check the code again. Let's execute it. So right at the start, we're going to assume position number 0 stores the highest value. So that means 45 gets saved in highest, my first element. That I do before the loop. And now in the loop, I need to compare the rest of the data one by one to find if I've got a value bigger than the first one, bigger than the first value. Okay, and we obviously, we're humans, we can easily see what is the highest, but we need to be able to show a computer how to do it. The algorithm is our key to that. So, after this first step gets executed, we are going to start with the loop. And in this loop, counter is initially 1. I know the first one is the highest so far, so I need to start looking at the next element. Okay, counter must be 1. That's where I start. And again, the for loop will now test, is counter less or equal to 4? And yes, it is. In my loop, I've got an if statement. So current element, counter is 1, array numbers, position 1 would be 12. Is 12 bigger than highest? And highest stores 45. So is 12 bigger than 45? And we've got a no. So that means the code would immediately jump to the end if. We'll jump to next count. That will increment the counter to 2. And the loop starts again. So count is, first of all, tested against the end of the loop. Is 2 less or equal to 4? Yes, it is. So now I've got the second iteration of the loop that would start. Array numbers, position 2, it's 66. Is 66 bigger than highest? And highest stores 45. So 66 bigger than 45. This is the second iteration of the loop. And yes, I did find 66 is bigger than 45. So what happens then? Take the data stored in array numbers, position 2, so the 66, and save that in highest. And code's going to do that. I've got a new highest. Find the end of the if statement, find the end of the loop, and count would be incremented to 3. Then we're going to start with the beginning of the loop again. Test again. Count less or equal to 4. Yes, it is. 3 is less or equal to 4. And now, my code test again. Array numbers, position 3. So that's the 80. Remember, we start 0, 1, 2, 3. So position or index 3. 80, is that bigger than 66? Okay, higher store 66 now. So my test is 80, is that bigger than 66? I'm busy with the third iteration of the loop. And yes, 80 is bigger than 66. So the true section of the if statement will execute. So it says take array numbers, position 3, that's the 80, save it in highest. So that means 66 would be replaced by 80. We find the end of the if statement, we find the end of the loop, and array count would be incremented by 1 to 4. And again, code will first test. So is 4 less or equal to 4? And that is still true. So now I go test array numbers, position or index 4, that's 20. Is 20 bigger than whatever is saved in highest? And we saved 80 currently in highest. So is 20 bigger than 80? And the answer is a definite no. So that means end if will execute, next count will execute, count is incremented by 1, we've got 5, and now my test says, is count less or equal to array numbers dot length minus 1, so is 5 less or equal to 4, and we've got a definite no there. That means the code will jump to, again, the first statement after the loop and highest, and 80 would be displayed by this code. Okay, so how many times did we execute this loop? We execute it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, this loop got executed 4 times. First iteration. Why? Because we start at 1 for the indexes for count. So first iteration tested if 12 was less than, no, we're testing for higher than. So if 12 is bigger than 45, that was not the case, apologies. Second iteration tested if 66 was bigger than 45, it was definitely the case. We saved 66 as the new highest. Then we tested in the third iteration 80. Is 80 bigger than 66? Yes, it was. So 80 became our new highest. And then we tested the last element in the fourth iteration 20. Is 20 bigger than 80? No, it wasn't. So highest remains intact. Okay, hope this was of assistance to you guys.